What's happening, everybody? Welcome to the channel. My name is Owie, and today I'm going to be reviewing episodes 1 and 2 for Amazon's The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power. Now, if you're watching this video and you're asking, Owie, do I need to watch Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings trilogy or his Hobbit trilogy in order to understand The Rings of Power? And that answer is no. Actually, Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings trilogy and his Hobbit films have nothing to do with The Rings of Power. And honestly, if you haven't watched The Lord of the Rings at all and you know nothing about it, I would not start with this series. I would start with this beautiful trilogy right here, the greatest trilogy ever produced. And that's coming from someone who hasn't read any of the Lord of the Rings books. I just love this extended trilogy right here, so if you want to dabble in the Lord of the Rings, that's where you start. And then you go to the Hobbit, and honestly, you could probably skip the Rings of Power, because oh man, it was kind of hard for me to get past the first episode of The Rings of Power, and if I could describe it in one word, it would be dull or boring. Pick one of those two words, because I fell asleep maybe 40 minutes into the first episode. Now, The Rings of Power, I mean, it looks expensive. When people describe this show, it's expensive, and that's a plus for the creators of this show, because this is the most expensive series ever created. I think every episode costs like $100 million. I don't know, I just made that up, but honestly, if you watch Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, and then you watch The Rings of Power and you'd have to guess which series was more expensive, you'd probably go with House of the Dragon, as pretty as The Rings of Power looked. That's just my opinion. Something about House of the Dragon looks way more authentic than anything in this show so far. Now, like I said, visually, the show so far is stunning. Great CGI. The fight scenes, what little there are okay so far, I guess. It has a very cinematic approach, but at the same time, it still has the pace of a TV series. Like, we're taking our time introducing all these characters, but the dialogue is so dull, and honestly, it feels so cringe at times as well. I know The Lord of the Rings had that Tolkien type of language where it's really elegant and kind of Shakespearean. In this show, they do the same thing, but it feels forced. Like, some of the dialogue, I'm like, okay, Shakespeare, let's tone it down a bit. And our characters in this show, oh man, I found like 90% of the characters in this show just dull. I don't care about any of them. Especially our main character, Lady Galadriel, or Galadriel, Warrior Galadriel, whatever she wants to be in this show. Like I said, I don't know what she was doing in the past. I just know her as Cate Blanchett in the Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings, where she's portrayed as a powerful, more elegant elf. She didn't need a sword or a shield to prove that she was worthy of power. She just had a presence about her, so you knew she was something not to be reckoned with. But in this show, they give her a sword and everything. She's more of a warrior. I haven't even seen her do any elven magic yet, so maybe that comes later on. But yeah, the character of Lady Galadriel, she's so damn boring and frustrating because she's so damn angry all the time. I mean, her character, since the minute she's introduced, she's got a chip on her shoulder, and she's just so damn angry. Like, she doesn't want to listen to anybody. She's just so focused on her quest for vengeance. And yeah, she's just angry. That's how I could describe her character. She's just an angry girl. And from the very beginning of this series, it's made to feel like this is only Galadriel's story. And honestly, I would have rather seen the whole beginning introduction to this series, the whole Morgoth, the War on the Elven Kingdoms or whatever. I would have rather seen a series just about that than whatever we're being forced to watch now. That seemed way more interesting. So once all these other side characters are introduced, I'm like, why should I care about any of these characters? I don't know. I mean, we got an elven warrior and his girlfriend or whatever we're focused on. Then we have the Harfoots, who are the earlier versions of the Hobbits. They're more nomadic and they're living more of a gypsy life than what we're used to seeing them as. They do find this being that arrives to Middle-earth on a comet, which may or not be Gandalf or some sort of wizard. I don't know. It's kind of interesting, honestly. I want to see who that character ends up being, but I mean, really the only character I like so far is Elrond and Durin, the Dwarven King. That was the only time I was actually invested in the stories, when Elrond has to go to Khazad-dûm to talk to Durin. That's the only time the characters in the show actually showed some personality. And yeah, even Elrond, I wasn't sure how I'd feel about this version of Elrond. If you look in comparison to The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, when we're first introduced to Elrond, he's commanding an elven army, And then you go to this show and our introduction to Elrond is he's writing poems or something on a tree, looking into the meadow, writing poems. I guess, but alright, I get it. This is a younger Elrond, I'll go with it. But yeah, but he's really the only character I find interesting so far. Him and the Dwarven King. Other than that, you could throw all these other characters in the trash. They're so damn boring. I mean, I get it. This is a show. It's gonna have the pacing of a show, but the cinematic feel of a movie. But man, the approach, like I said, it's boring and dull. The dialogue is boring and dull. I don't know how many times I could say those two words, but I wish the writing was better and our characters had more interesting things to do. Because I hate to keep comparing these two, but Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, or just Game of Thrones in general, there's just a lot of scenes where they're world building and it's just nothing but dialogue. But the characters are just way more interesting and the dialogue feels so much more organic and the world building feels way more interesting as well compared to the Rings of Power. Like, you could strip away the name of Lord of the Rings and everything that has to do with Lord of the Rings, and I don't think like 90% of the people would be invested in this show. It would just be another generic fantasy show like The Wheel of Time, which I fell asleep during that series too. So honestly, I wasn't even gonna give this show a shot, but I had nothing to do this weekend, so I might as well have watched the first 2 episodes. And honestly, that first episode, after I watched it, it put me to bed early. I mean, I had a good night's rest after watching episode 1 for how dull it was. I'm checking out. I'm gonna let it pile up and then maybe I'll revisit it again. But honestly, this makes me want to revisit The Hobbit. I always have perceived The Hobbit as being over bloated, too much CGI, but it still had some charm to it. Like the Desolation of Smaug, I remember liking a lot. So I think on my to-do list, I'm gonna rewatch The Hobbit because I just need to. I need something to redeem the Lord of the Rings brand for me because the Rings of Power ain't it. If you want to introduce yourself to the Lord of the Rings, start with this glorious trilogy right here. So if I'd had to give a rating on the Lord of the Rings of Power so far, I'm gonna have to give it 2.5 O's out of 5. Alright everybody, that's my review and my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of the Rings of Power. Post down in the comment section below of what you thought of this series. What would you rate the Rings of Power? What did you hate about it? What did you like about it? Let me know. And if you like this video, make sure you smash that like button. If you want to see more from me, subscribe to my channel as well and ring that notification bell. And I will see you all next time. See ya!